week 41 of the calendar year, and this week's crafted concept is all about how surprise and the affect of your learning design can boost memory. Affective learning context is all about the wow, the pizzazz, the really memorable moment that has the affect, A-F-F-E-C-T, on the pupil, the athlete's learning in such a way that it's a light bulb, a flash bulb, if you like, moment that really supports the drawing down from long-term memory in the future, because you just remember that wow moment. Pride carves learning into memory. So when your learning design is taking place, give consideration to how you can create those memorable moments. That doesn't always have to be you come into the classroom and create the kind of moment that you see in the Get Into Teaching advert. So classic, put some bicarbonate in with a can of Coke and watch it explode. That isn't every lesson. You can create surprise through humor, through interesting anecdote, through a really interesting and visual that you've had created. And a really great way when it comes to visuals might be that you consider the use of, when it comes to the affective learning context, people often ask me, Marcus, what do you mean though? Why does it do that? Other than it being that flashbulb moment, what is it that creates the more salient, deeper, resonated memory? Well, the answer is dopamine. So the release of dopamine, which has gained traction in recent years, mainly to do with the use of screen use and quick dopamine hits, dopamine surges through that surprise moment because the anticipation as to what was to come next, so what's the next thing that could occur, creates a chemical signal from the brain that says, pay attention, what's happening right now matters. It's that anticipation of the next thing that could happen that actually creates the deeper encoding in the memory. So surprise is human biology's way of actually marking some significance. In a classroom environment that looks very similar to this one here, there are desks, there are chairs, there is a screen, there is a teacher or an instructor that is projecting and offering their observations or offering their learning design to their learners. Then the brain, as we know, is an incredible organ. It's an incredible predictor of the future, and it enjoys predicting the future. So the consistent behaviors that are expected from this classroom become incredibly different when a prediction error occurs, and that is your element of surprise moment. It's the thing that you've created in your learning design that makes your learners, your pupils, or your athletes out on the sports field go, I was not expecting that. I have a prediction error. That's the dopamine surge, and that leads to, this is important. I'm going to create more support when it comes to encoding this memory. A little bit of in-depth neurochemistry for you. Why does dopamine help when it comes to encoding those long-term memories? Well, the reason is that dopamine acts as what's known as a neuromodulator. And in doing so, it strengthens the synaptic connections. So the connections between one synapse to another become strengthened as a result of the release of dopamine into the brain. So when we release dopamine through that surprise moment, through that unpredictable feature of your instruction that the learners did not expect, then your neuromodulator, dopamine, is going to help with the long-term potentiation of those synapses, which makes them easier to draw down from long-term memory in the future. By combining some kind of emotional affect with your learning context, you are utilizing the human brain to its full capacity. The emotional signaling that's created by that surprise moment, it fires up the amygdala being the part of the brain that considers where there's threat and what's happening around it. In doing so, we release that neuromodulator, dopamine, which supports the enhancement of synapse delivery, but also the amygdala's relationship with the hippocampus, which is where memories are stored, fires up, it lights up. And so in this situation, this was really interesting, and this was our learning. Amygdala to hippocampus, supported by dopamine, and we create that really strong sense of learning and encoding to the long-term memory in that moment, all through your learning design as a result of your learning environment. And down the line, of course, you're going to give some consideration to how you would critique that learning to support feedback and future development. And so to close on this week's material on the crafted concept, week 41, affective learning, creating surprise moments. Surprise isn't just about decoration. It's not just a gimmick because you're being observed that day. It's by learning design. And that learning design only works when your learning environment is a safe one, and one that has routine and expectation and respect. By shaping moments that disrupt those expectations, we create deeper attention. And through that attentiveness is where richer thought, deeper processing, and thus more durable memory is born. Affective learning reminds us that humans are not only thinkers, but also feelers. It's that emotional salience that comes with the learning context that can create those really powerful moments. Unpredictable. The dichotomy, the binary nature of these things is really important when it comes to affective learning context. And I've got to say that first and foremost, teachers, it's up to you to make sure you have a safe learning environment, a rapport, and a consistency in your behaviors that your learners feel safe and trusting of you. Because then, when you offer those surprise moments, those variations in the practice, then they're going to trust you and they're going to follow you. If you yourself are quite inconsistent and you don't have a sense of expectation, respect within that learning agreement that you effectively have as the instructor and the power relation that you possess, then affective learning context isn't going to work for you. Rapport first, routine first, plus surprise equals deeper learning. What does it look like when learners, athletes, pupils, those in the corporate environment first turn up to training? They first arrived at the practice. How are you going to hook them into the learning bout that they're about to take part in? What about beginning with something unusual rather than what feels typical in any other learning environment? You come in, you sign a register, you put your water bottle over here, you do this, you do that, you have a little chat and everything's a little bit bitty. What if you immediately prime their attention and spark curiosity by setting some kind of small task orientation? Whether there's a box over there with some equipment in it, I want you to go and make up a possession game as they arrive. Or there's a do now activity as you walk in through the door. Hello, welcome to the lesson. Here's your do now activity. Off you go and sit in your groups. That way, we can immediately affect learning and prime their attention for what's to come. Important to remember though that one of the major issues with dopamine, and the reason that it's got a lot of traction and a lot of interest in recent times because of its link to quick hits on YouTube Shorts or TikTok short form videos, is that the brain very quickly adapts and becomes used to what was originally surprising and novel to it. So you need to be really careful that you aren't just trying to create surprise for the sake of it and it becomes gimmicky in your instruction as a coach or as an instructor in the classroom or in a corporate learning environment. Surprise doesn't have to be real pizzazz, like a huge moment. Surprise is just something that feels slightly unpredictable in what is otherwise a stable environment. So be really careful in your learning design that you don't end up becoming gimmicky and therefore predictable through your gimmick, and you lose that neuromodulation through dopamine anyway. First example of what this looks like in a non-gimmicky fashion, if we go to the world of sport, it could be as simple as changing the learning design, varying the practice in practice. So change the rules, change the parameters, change the playing area, change something about the drill, about the practice that feels unexpected to the athletes based on what they've done so far. That shock and required adaptation needed from them, the sort of resilience to be able to adapt and then strategize, makes your players think differently and therefore their learning sticks. Now that's just a form of elaboration. If I'm changing the playing area or the rules within the game, then they're going to have to draw down long-term memory from different situations that feel similar. When's another time we've been outnumbered? Or what did I do last time the playing area felt really small and tight? And so that becomes both salient from a learning perspective because of the surprise of the change, but also because you're asking naturally for them to reflect on prior experiences and bring them to this new situation. This is a great chance this week through the affective learning context, the element of surprise, for me to say, look, I am not a neuroscientist. That's not my training. I am an educator at heart and a performance coach. But what the crafted concept can offer you is high levels of experience, learning, development, and most importantly, actual implementation of ideas that come from cognitive psychology, a little bit of neurochemistry, to be able to support your learning environment. And that's why the crafted concept is here to help you in your performance environment in sport, performance environment in education, or performance environment in the corporate world. Swipe up and DM. Meanwhile, in the classroom, something striking, something different could be as simple as changing the learning style or design within the room. So if typically your lessons tend to be at desks through a little bit of collaborative conversation and maybe looking at a PowerPoint, then it could become different. And you set pupils a different kind of task where you're giving them ball pens and you're asking them to come up and use whiteboards and collaborate in that way, or use some kind of digital tech that you have in the room for them to come and work on that. Or possibly you're asking them to do something like write down on mini whiteboards, write on the table and then rub it off, work together collaboratively. Just do something that creates a jolt or a twist or difference in your lesson so that you can affect their learning. Another great way to affect learning in the classroom, and this is for colleagues of which there are so many now from the many schools that I work with in both state maintained and in the independent sector, a lot of curriculum is moving towards shorter lessons that are chunked into doubles. So we have quick hit lessons of 35 to sort of 45 minutes, but then when you have a double period, that comes over a long period of time, 75, 80, 85, 90 minutes worth of learning in one classroom. This is an ideal moment for you to create mini lessons within your double. So mix up the learning requirements, the learning design, the different task orientations that you expect of your learners. In doing so, you are consistently affecting with surprise and change across your lesson plan. Week 41 of the calendar year, and this week's crafted concept is all about how surprise and the affect of your learning design can boost memory. Affective learning context is all about the wow, the pizzazz, the really memorable moment that has the affect, A-F-F-E-C-T, on the pupil, the athlete's learning in such a way that it's a light bulb, a flash bulb, if you like, moment that really supports the drawing down from long-term memory in the future, because you just remember that wow moment.